I'm just trying to prevent, heated.
Right, fine. All good.
I mean,
I think-
you're right, but it's hello. It's 3 o'clock, and I have echo because I'm hearing myself. Great. Listen to that. Good afternoon. This is SML, Structured Email Session. I'm Alexei Melnikov. Angel Brunson is next to me. And hopefully you have seen the note well by this time in the week. If not, try to make sure you're aware of IETF, IPR, harassment, and other policies. And in case you need, this is various BCPs you need to know about. But the main thing is treat colleagues with respect, speak slowly, try to avoid slang or colloquialisms, and use reasoned arguments. So we need a note taker, actually. That's the thing. That would be great. Thank you. Thank you, DKG. Add yourself to the notes. So this is the proposed agenda on 2 slides. First, we'll talk about vacation notices because we didn't get to them last time. And bad chairs finally issued adoption call. We pressed the button in data tracker, but we forgot to send email to the mailing list and we never followed up. So now there is the official 3 weeks adoption call. So please make sure you reply to this. So, and then we'll do the core document and then we do the use cases at the end. Timing is approximate. We'll try to make sure that we deal at least with some issues with the core, and then if we spend a bit less on something, then we'll reallocate as appropriate. Any agenda bashing? Okay. That Hans-Jörg.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the SML session. You can drive the slides.
Yeah.
Right? So we start with the structured vacation notice today. Not sure we will need the full 20 minutes, but let's see.
You can use less.
Yeah, of course. So next slide, please. So just a quick reminder, what is this about? Everybody knows vacation out of office notices as a common feature in email, probably. So most email clients or email web interfaces will allow you to set these kind of information, but it's typically just human readable. So somebody is like on IETF, will return next week, but you have to manually interpret this kind of information in order to act upon that. So this is a very nice use case where you can illustrate the benefit of SML, because you can actually create a pretty small snippet where you can basically actually put in this very basic information, like for instance, the start and end date, which actually the user anyway needs to formalize already in the source system when setting up the out of office information. So there is probably not even an extra data input to that extent, but you would just generate on the side of the absentee this kind of structured data implicitly in the tool, and add this tool as additional metadata to the out of office notice sent out. So this is the basic idea here, so that the client of the recipient basically can understand basically what's going on and can probably act upon that kind of information in some way, like suggesting a follow-up or reminder to set, or sometimes there's also a replacement person mentioned in these kind of emails. So you could have a one-click redirect this email to the colleague of the absentee, these kind of things. This is according to the charter, so some small meta information. Typically, it's out of the charter to basically specify particular use cases. We have a use case document where we collect an overview of use cases, which we still will hear today from Ben later on. But there is an exception for those use cases which are directly related to email technology or email clients, email client features, and obviously vacation notices are one of that. There's already an example implementation of that. For RunQ webmail, the link is here. It's not very well maintained recently, but it should still work. It's also not yet perfect. And as Alexei said, we skipped this presentation last time in Vancouver due to other discussions we had. So the updates since then, plus the time before, is basically that in the documents there were some smaller fixes, and there is basically a GitHub issue created for the actual vacation notice format, because there was some discussion about that. We will come to that, I think, in the next slides. And there are actually 5 points I would shortly discuss. And next slide, the first one is about timestamps. So let me see here by myself. Yeah, that's just as a context, the proposed model so far, just that you have it seen once. So you see here a start and an end date, a potential replacement person mentioned, and some note of the thing. Of course, you could still have the human readable part of that out of office message in parallel send. So this is just the structure and metadata sent in the background. Next slide, please. So for the timestamp, the current model so far included only days, like full day dates in that sense, or all day dates. And there was some feedback that some systems, I think it was like, for instance, Microsoft Exchange, also allow you to set the absence even on a time granularity, like you can say I'm absent from noon that day to the afternoon the other day. Yeah, so that makes pretty sense probably to support. Can easily be included. Maybe one more side question here is if we even need to go to a time zone here. Probably yes, because the out of office messages might span a DST shift, which is the main use case for that. But I would like to hear if there's any thumbs up, thumbs down. I don't know. What does thumb down mean? No time zone. Okay. I hear.
Then example from noon of one day to another is kind of meaningless, right? So
Sorry, this is Daniel Kahn-Gilmore. I was on the notepad and not on the. I'll try to get so I can get in the queue properly. I think it would be a big mistake not to include the time zone. I don't think we want to ask the user the time zone, but I think it would be a huge mistake to not actually include the time zone. Sorry.
Okay.
Those of us who travel in different time zones or meet with people in different time zones, it's a disaster to not get that.
Okay.
I'll join the queue in a sec. So what is actually the time zone needed for here? Because it's a very edge case that if it's generally this is a near future thing. And so if it's specified in UTC for this, it would only change if the time zone definition itself changed, because you can translate it into whatever your local time zone is. It's just that always once you're shipping time zones, you've got to ship what's the time zone definitions, is it IANA only, etc., which is fine, but I'm not as convinced it necessarily needs the added complexity.
If I might shortly respond, but you can maybe add to that. In my experience, the main use case for time zones is basically if between the two dates there is actually a DST shift, going on, which could be different for other.
Bingo. Could be, I can tell you, I was I got an appointment for a NomCom interview,
Yeah.
and it said 0800 Pacific time, UTC -7. So I had to write to them and say, when do you actually want me to come? You know, and this was like for some reason, large companies are completely unable to get their time zone arithmetic correct. So I think forcing everything to UTC, I think, might be the least of the set of evils.
Yeah. Okay, I see some puzzled face with Neil, but actually I think it's enough of a feedback, I think, to come back with some elaboration on that in the draft, if that's fine for you, Neil. And then we can discuss on a particular proposal. Yeah? So I'm not sure if this particular point is worth now a 5-person long queue. I don't know, but feel free.
Ben?
So I would just put only dates in there and not bother about time at all. Just leave this aside, because there's not much point telling other people that I'm out of the office for 2 hours. There's a vacation notice. So that I would do that. That completely leaves the whole problem aside, because then you don't worry about time zones at all. Other option, what it would do, it would use timestamps in the Unicode sense. And because the person who sets the time zone, who sets the vacation notice, it's using that local time zone. So I'm in Germany. I'm out of office in Germany from that to that time. And that's the relevant time zone. No matter where you are in the world, I'm going to be out of office in Germany, not in your local time zone. So if you really want to do time, I would do it this way, but I might be wrong about this.
Okay.
I would just go dates.
I think that shows the topic is indeed a little controversial. So as I said, we need to follow up on that. I personally, I think actually it's two different facets. If it's like allows time and if it allows a time zone, I mean, it can still be worthwhile also with a full day thing, but that's another story. But yeah, thanks everybody. I think
John Clancy.
Yeah, if the reality is that you only need dates and not times, that's fine. But if you're going to do times, we've had multiple examples this week and last weekend about why forcing everything to UTC is bogus and time zones are important. So if you're going to do time, do it right. If you're not going to do time, that's fine.
All right.
Thank you, John. All right.
If there's no more to this, I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so there was also some feedback at the last time that the replacement person should be allowed to be referenced by other means and within the structured data. So if you remember the example from the beginning, the replacement person is modeled as part of the JSON LD. But there were some people meaning that should also be allowed as a vCard, which could be referenced from the JSON LD. But then comes also the question, should it be just a vCard or should it also be allowed to be a URL on a website? Let's say there's a corporate website or something like that, where I could just put a link like, find here the person, or this is the profile page of the person you should refer to. And maybe there is an even higher level question of if this should only be persons in the literal sense, or if I should also be able to say to refer to a certain team or a subgroup or something like that. Any opinions?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
So my guess is if the initial data object is modeled in JSON LD anyway, most people will want to use the JSON LD format. Even if there is a vCard, I guess most people, it's just easier to stick to JSON LD and maybe make a vCard optional. Would be my first guess.
Yep. Ben?
So this is Ben. I agree with Joris. I would stay in the JSON LD format mostly and encourage that. And second to the team, yes, replacement of a team with a team is a thing. I'm not here. Send to the inbox of the IT team if you have questions.
Right.
Pete, sorry. Oh. Well, I can save you the trip. So there is Pete asking in chat, is there not a J card? And Robert is saying there's J's contact. So yes. Yeah.
I'm just relaying what was asked in Brisbane, but of course it's a valid question also to use J card. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll take it to the mailing list.
Okay.
Sorry. Next slide.
All right. Yeah. Another question, as it says, is a question of multiple periods of absence. So assuming somebody is on a multi-hop trip, this is something, I mean, it's not, in that sense, it's not strictly required because you can always intermediarily update your vacation notice anyway. Yeah, but just, I think that came up in discussion. So looking around if anybody has a strong opinion on this one. But,
Meh.
okay. Yeah, that's good. Thanks. I think counting 3 to 1. Oops.
Oh,
no, you missed something.
sorry.
Huh?
No, that was just me saying meh. Hold on.
Use the cursor keys.
Replacement person, multiple periods. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, yeah. So this is a little bit going into another direction. So the question is, the current feature, like you know it from your email client, is basically for a person itself, or thought from the perspective of an individual. Whereas in practice, you will also have this kind of feature used by services in a certain way. Yeah. And actually, if you think about it further, it might also be something that is quite actually related to something like no reply messages, which you have from home services. So the question is a little bit: should we focus this in terms of this individual user use case, or should we also look into and try to incorporate this to make it suitable for also similar use cases to a certain extent? And how far should that go? That's a basic question here.
This is Daniel Gilmore.
Yeah.
So this is sort of related to the previous question,
Mhm.
I think, because as you get into institutional outages or planned events, they may become more complicated than a simple. This person's out of office. This also gets into questions about scheduling and when the vacation notice should arrive, right? Do I want to say that, do I want to let all my colleagues know in advance how long I'm going to be out of office? How many times do I want to tell them? Can I attach multiple ones of these things? And when we're talking about our restaurant is going to be closed, there can easily be 2 holidays that come up within the next week where the restaurant would want to tell people that. So I don't know if this is about a reply or if this is about proactively sending these things so people know ahead of time not to count on me during those weeks. I don't know what people are used to here. I'm used to just you send an email and you get a bounce back that says this person's on vacation, but maybe we're talking about something much more proactive. So I don't know what the working group's trying to do here on that front. If somebody wants to explain the scope of what they think is important, that'd be useful to answer these questions. You look confused now. I didn't mean to confuse you. My question is, are we talking about just the case where I send you an email and your reply comes back to me automatically saying this person's on vacation? Or are we talking about something more proactive where every message that I send to you comes with a notice that says, by the way, if you mail me next week, I won't be in the office for the following 3 days.
So the reason why I was looking for this is because there are 2 dimensions here. Indeed, the actual draft includes the discussion that once you have formalized out of office notice, you might want to allow people to send it proactively, which is currently not possible technically, right? Because you might just put it in the footer or something like that, right? So this option exists in the current draft. we didn't talk about here right now because it was not controversial last time.
But I'm asking, is that a goal? If that's a goal,
Mhm.
then we need to go back to the previous slide. And everybody collectively shrugging and saying meh on
Mm-hmm.
there being 2 of them is a mistake.
Okay, fair enough. Ben?
So proactive vacation notices are a thing. I did receive them. They do exist. Like people telling me a week in advance, by the way, don't bother me. If you will need something, tell me now, something like this. I don't think that automatically implies that we need to make multiple timeframes because too bad for you if you have too many vacations, too bad for you. But I'm not going to be wondering which week you're going to be there. It's just like people saying in the next week I'll be gone for 3 weeks. So, no reply is something entirely different semantically. I would definitely not mix that in there. It also means something different because vacation notice only means, okay, maybe the email is going to be read in a delay or processed in a late form. No reply means nobody, this is def null. Nobody will ever read this, is going straight to trash. So I will react to that in a very different way in an email client than to a vacation notice.
So in terms of Daniel, I would agree with Ben that necessarily the multiple periods of absence are not strictly related to the proactive kind of topic. Or otherwise, I would like to understand why you think so.
People's plans change.
Okay.
Things come up ahead of time. Different people need different windows of proactive notice.
You mean it might change, you mean? Or?
If all vacation notices are telling you this person is on vacation and they will be back at time T,
right,
then you don't need multiple windows. But if we accept that one of the goals here is that I can alert you in advance of an impending vacation, then now we are opening the question of, well, how far in advance can I alert you? Well, can I alert you a week in advance? Can I alert you a month in advance? If I'm going to, you're saying no, and you're saying so there's a disagreement here. So
I was neutral in that.
okay. Yeah. But depending on how far in advance you can alert someone, it makes sense to have at least to have more than one outstanding vacation notice, because if my policy is I'm going to alert you a month in advance of my vacations, and I have 2 vacations pending in the next month.
Okay, I get your point. Okay.
So we need to decide what the goal is.
Hi, Jim Fenton. I'm going to provoke discussion by suggesting something that is probably out of scope, but I'm sort of trying to bound the problem. Your restaurant is closed during holidays idea here got me to thinking, suppose you had a well-known email address, hours@restaurant.com or example restaurant.com, and its entire function is to provoke a vacation notice that gives you the hours the restaurant is open. I mean, is that in scope or not? I'm not sure.
I mean, yeah.
And that would be definitely an example where you'd want to have, multiple windows and stuff like that.
Okay.
And I mean, kind of breaking the queue. Syntactically, an example, it was just an array of dates or a single date range. So actually, syntactically, it's very easy. The difference is not a big deal. At least the way it was shown in your example. So.
Yeah, this is Pete. I mean, and you'll look at the note that John Clenson put in the chat as well. But as soon as you open this up to something other than email vacation notices, which is what the restaurant thing does, you are opening it up to a huge number of uses that people will use. Which means you're going to have time zones. You're going to have pointers to calendar entries with, repetition and all sorts of things. So, like, DKG was saying, you can either cut this down and say this is only for this particular purpose, or if you want a general purpose thing, make sure it's got all of the possible semantics that folks are going to use for this.
Last word, DKG.
So sorry, just one more point. On top of the challenges of the calendaring stuff, you're also going to need updates when someone's vacation changes,
right?
So that you know what gets replaced if you're doing proactive.
That's correct, but that's a thing that probably solved to the main draft, because that's a generic problem for structured email.
Okay, and you think that's a solved problem for any proactive?
It's probably not yet finally solved, but there's a proposal in the core draft for that. Yeah. All right. To which we will probably come now. Okay, we have this final point. Okay, but this anyway is probably not very controversial, because that's actually something in, again, corporate out of office, where you have this distinction of an internal external audience, but usually as a recipient of the message, you will not know that, or know that implicitly anyway. So I guess.
Yeah, it can also be like if you're using sieve underneath, it can be a sieve test. Yeah. Right, we done with this?
Yeah.
So, as people are so very excited about vacation notices and restaurant announcing their working hours, please comment on an adoption call. Obviously, the draft is not done, so we have things to do, but hopefully it's a good starting point.
So probably just to clarify in one sentence again the question about the goal that came up, right? So the current draft and what was the initial goal of it was basically to address this human, the established kind of vacation notices you have, right? So all of the other questions we had came up in discussion last time, and the question is basically if it makes sense to include them, yes or no. Basically to change the goal.
I'll give you 40 minutes.
1 second. Are you ready? Yep. All right. Here we come with the core draft. Next slide, please. So the core draft is supposed to describe the main framework for structured email. There is an actual example implementation that was already there last time. You can find under the URL. What was done since the last IETF were basically realizing some promises we made in the discussion. So there were questions about examples and the ability to get hold of some of the legacy structured email, which is already around in many of our mailboxes. So in the meantime, you find the related messages on the list. We published some anonymized examples for real-world structured email, which is already sent by various sources and providers like airlines and these kind of things. There's actually an email IMAP account scanner tool where if you want to you can scan your own email account to find these kind of structured email, which you might not be aware of yet in your existing mailbox. If you find something example in there and are willing to share that publicly, that would be great. If you can probably forward it in an anonymized version or something like that, and we might include it in the repository, or you can do a pull request or so. Part of that is also some code for the Jakarta Mail library, which is a common email library for Java, which basically shows how you can extract structured email from an existing email message with Jakarta Mail and the corresponding mail objects, and also how you can send it, which you can also use to test drive some of the proposals from this core draft and some of the alternatives we are going to discuss in next time. What also happened in parallel is that some other implementations beyond the Roundcube one were pushed forward. So we see a screenshot in the next slide actually of the brand new Thunderbird desktop, which was recently released. So this is still a private fork. So this is not part of the one, of course, you can download. But what you can see here is that actually there was some structured data inside of a restaurant, and that is basically rendered here in some sort of a card view on top. And you have some actionable information underneath, which will directly trigger or can trigger the actions on your mobile. Next slide, please. I think I probably told already that everything in the start slide, so you can look this up for reference. That's basically what the example library and the example tools. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's the GitHub repository is the examples. I also talked about that already. Next slide, please. All right, so we come to the meat here. And I think one of the very main core questions to clarify in the draft overall, and which was already discussed in various of the meetings, is basically how to actually include the structured data in the email. Just as a reminder for everybody who is probably not so familiar, so the legacy way of doing is like it's used by, for instance, Gmail and Yahoo right now, is that you basically put the JSON LD structured data markup within the HTML body of the email within a script tag. So that's the more or less what already exists and what some of the senders are using. This, of course, is in a like thinking of it in a formal way, a little bit of a special approach, I would just say it. And there was quite some discussion, especially at the last meeting in Vancouver, about the backdraws of this and about benefits of having a dedicated MIME body part where the structured data resides. I think there was quite some feedback from vendors that that would have multiple advantage in terms of efficiency and so on, because you don't need to get to the HTML body part, extract it there, which is quite a tedious process and which would also probably not allow a lot of optimizations in client-server communication. So it seemed like there was quite some agreement in that sense that it might make sense for structured data to reside into a separate body part. And let me see here shortly. There is now the question, we have different types of not use cases, but there is 2 or 3 forms to distinguish. So one is what we call full representation in SML, which means that basically the structured data is a complete representation of the human readable part. So the machine can safely assume that the fallback HTML or text does not need to be displayed to the user because the complete information is in the structured part. And if the user somehow agrees or however the client processes it, the HTML part can be omitted. So for this kind of use case, multi-part alternative is already in place and would be the natural choice. And that was also sort of the outcome of the discussion. One very minor thing that came up when reviewing or looking at the specs for multi-part alternative is probably, and that's what I would like to ask the room, is the question of is there any, let's say, backdraw of having let me see, sorry, I'm a little bit lost here. No, sorry. There is actually one note from Gmail which do a similar thing for a thing called AMP email, which basically says like in that multi-part alternative case, you should position that not at the end like the RC says, but it says you should position it in the middle of the chain due to some reference which obviously is broken, so you cannot look it back up. So the question would be, is there any experience here from clients or implementers on why this might be the case, or if which clients might not support that? And is that worth considering or further testing, or can we safely assume that if we recommend to put the multi-part alternative at the very end, as the actual spec says, that this will work out well? Peter's looking a little bit. It's actually not stated there, so there's a link. The statement comes from Gmail documentation of AMP email, and in this statement there is a reference to a website which is cited as a source which doesn't exist anymore. Probably not. Yeah. Okay.
Daniel Kahn-Gilmore. Sorry, I'm trying to use the mic. I don't know how many remote folks we have.
Yeah.
So the question was, have you checked archives.org?
Mm-hmm.
That might be worth looking up.
Right.
But we need some test infrastructure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing here? How many mail clients do we think are important and worth testing?
Mm-hmm.
Why can we not just feed a message to a bunch of mail clients that we think are important and have who's building that infrastructure?
I mean, I told you just right now there is this repository now, right, of the data. So you can
it's a
use
repository of data, and my question is, how do I can do a pull request to that repository of data and say, here's a new message I'd like to see rendered. will it render in all the mail clients that we care about? Why is there not a turnkey thing that says, here's a screenshot of this message open in this mail client? How are we going to know that we're doing something reasonable if we don't have that infrastructure set up? Who's setting it up? I agree it's hard. That's why I'm not doing it. But how are we going to know if this stuff works if we don't?
DKG already did it for lamps,
And
you
it
know,
was
as MIME
insane.
header protection. That was quite a bit of a, yeah.
So-
I think, can I maybe rephrase it as admonition to let's figure out how we're going to test it, and we should test it. And
Yes, thank you for making it a little bit nicer than what I was saying. I'm sorry for being aggressive about it, but I think raising this question without having a plan for how to answer that with data is hard. You know,
But
it's just guesses.
I'm not sure we're on the same page here. I mean, I told you there is this repository of different kinds of messages where you could exactly test that. Yeah. So my question is basically, does anybody, so everybody here who is a client, yeah, could use these messages to see at least if that multi-part alternative thing works out or not for the client, right?
Right. And I've also built such a repository for other messages.
Awesome.
See what happens. And the response that I got was crickets.
What does crickets mean? Sorry.
You know, when it's silent and then
Okay.
the crickets are like chirp, chirp,
Okay.
chirp, chirp. That's what it was.
Yeah.
That was what I got.
I mean,
I couldn't get people to run a reliable set of tests.
okay.
And I think the answer is, if there are clients that we care about, somebody needs to make an automated thing that you turn the crank and you get screenshots, at least, if we care about visual representation, of what the messages actually look like in these clients. So we can say, well, look, we did this test. And yes, we found this piece of cruft on the network. And we think that this cruft is old and irrelevant for the pieces that we care about.
Again, there's two things here, right? Because as of now, you could not do any screenshot because the clients also need to support SML as such, right? There is a mechanism on how to put SML inside.
I beg to differ.
Sorry? Yeah.
I beg to differ. What we are actually trying to find out is whether we will break the clients that don't support SML.
Okay, yeah. Okay, sorry, then I
those are the
misunderstood
tests
you.
that we want, right? And that's what this is about. This is about what happens to the legacy clients.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was misconfusing what you said about visualization. Okay, yeah.
Right. No, we want to know, what does it do to the legacy clients?
Right. I mean, we do that for some standard clients like, Thunderbird and Outlook, okay? But
how do you do it? Where are the results? Is that the Jakarta repository you're talking about? Does it actually automatically produce screenshots of the messages
I mean,
that we're inserting?
you're asking for quite a lot right here, okay?
Well, no, but I'm saying that I want to answer this question. You've raised a really good question.
Yeah,
And the only way to answer it is data.
So what I take from you is absolutely a good point. Yeah. So we will put up probably a table of the things we have already tested. So I'm sorry we didn't yet provide that right here. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't propose it.
This got way more aggressive than I meant it to, and
No,
I
yeah,
apologize for my part on that. I think what you're doing is great.
Yeah.
And I'm saying we need to answer it.
No, it's absolutely a good point. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
yeah, I think the answer is probably we don't know in this room because we need data. So,
but
people need to help test.
Just to very shortly add on that. So I think this particular mention of AMP here, right? So it's actually something we couldn't reproduce. Yeah. So the question was basically, is there with some mainstream clients? So the question is, here in the room, there's a lot of more people that may have heard of stories or might know where this comes from. Yeah. So the question is that dangerous what we propose here, or can we trust that what works?
I
Sorry,
think
yeah.
we'll. Okay, sorry, just
Mhm.
kind of speaking from the floor. In the way, I think it's a warning, but it doesn't matter. If we test and we find the same thing, we'll discover it. If it's not the case, then it's like, it doesn't matter, you know.
So I think Daniel was saying, I think there was a little bit of misunderstanding. You're saying there's a test repository as SML messages that we could render. Daniel was speaking of something else. He was saying, if we do this, what's being proposed here, which is not the SML message that you have in your archive, if we do this multi-part alternative.
No, I think we agreed already on.
Yeah, we need to test in the existing clients how they fall back to this,
Yes.
how they render that.
Sure.
Daniel was saying we need automated test infrastructure. This is really hard. Like this is like a 6-month project for multiple engineers. I don't have the money to spend on that. You probably don't. If this,
so it's litmus and stuff.
If there's services, please let us know. Send this to the email. I want to know about that too. So send it to the mailing list. That would be great. I mean, we can spend a few bucks on that. That's great. But building the infrastructure is hard. Failing that, if we don't have that, we can just test it manually. Like if somebody constructs the MIME messages that we want to use, and we all just go in our favorite mail client or least favorite mail client and test it there.
This is Pete. Not going to repeat anything that's already been said. Just to put a fine point on, someone should be regularly checking for this repository, because I don't think there's anybody from Gmail in the room. Gmail.
Yeah.
Everybody should be regularly checking Outlook, because there's no one in the room who is coding that client, as far as I know. And probably Apple Mail. Are there Apple people?
Apple
here?
Mail's behind you.
There are. Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to insult Philip. He's here. Yay. But no, I mean, since we're, what we're worried about here, and this is going to come up in other things, not just this one, is there are folks who have implemented that have done funky things that we need to, as a working group, check to make sure that they're going to be okay with what we're about to do to them. Someone's got to take responsibility for each one of the ones where people aren't actually here, but we know that millions of users are going to have to deal with.
Right. All right.
We have a comment in chat actually saying from Marvin that affected client was Apple Mail both on iOS and macOS. Not sure if they fixed it now.
Okay. That's why we can probably.
But also, I think the other side of it, even if it's broken, if we know people who can help us and make it right, we'll talk to them, right? Well, first we need to see how big the issue this is really, and then we'll find out. All right, thank you.
Thanks for the message. Yeah. I think we can go to the next slide.
No.
Oh.
Speaking as participant, I actually need that kind of testing infrastructure in my day job. It's not a given that I can get the necessary budget, but I do need it in my day job. Could reuse it. I mean, if it's there. And I once started a company together with someone who went on to found exactly that kind of testing service. So I'll see if I can raise the money. If so, it will be done. If not, it won't.
Ben, last word on this topic.
So even if we find some clients broken, I'm very strongly in favor of what Alexei said, to try to retreat and get them fixed instead of saying, we won't do that. Multi-part alternative is just to answer the direct question, there's very strictly defined. The last part is the one that you render if you support that. So if you put AMP or structured email in the middle, we're kind of breaking the semantics of multi-part alternative, which then creates problems for other clients who are complying because they throw away everything, then the last thing that they support. Thunderbird is one of them. So I'm very strongly in favor of strictly adhering to multi-part alternative as defined, making it the last part.
Yeah, I think we might need to test both the last part and not the last part, because it's also going to be so interesting. Yeah, and client might support or might not support. So it's kind of, yeah. All right. Okay, moving on.
Moving on. So now the next question is a little bit maybe even trickier, because the question is now, if we want to put structured data in the dedicated body part, how we deal with that case of what we call in the draft partial representation. So partial representation means the structured data is only representative for a part of the content of the message, which means the client will, or the user will still want to read the HTML or text part of the message. And the structured data is just in addition to that. So a typical use case would be something like a newsletter, which in the future might still be something a designer or sender might want to, design in a very nice way and have exactly in that HTML rendered form shown to the user. But the sender might want to convey some additional structured data to that newsletter in the background, so the client can consider how to help out the user with that. For instance, I have a music newsletter or something like that. You could have an annotation of the contained songs, which makes it easier for the user to deal with the content or with the modular parts of the content of that newsletter. So the interesting question is now, how would we stuff that into MIME? The natural idea that might come into mind is, of course, in that case, use instead of multipart alternative, which has this implicit semantics of being a full representation somehow, to use multipart related. However, when looking a little bit in the draft or in the specs of multipart related, the question is that comes to my mind when reading is this I think it would be somehow okayish to do it. So from what I was reading in those draft, it's not strictly a violation of what multipart related means. But I had at least some question marks in mind when reading that, if this is like an intended use of multipart related in a way.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Because what do you mean by that? Do you mean multi-part related with top level part being HTML and one of reference part being JSON-LD?
For instance, yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
or do you mean something else? You can still use multi-part related. It's not very well defined for non-HTML top part, but
so
technically it can be used. It's just never been really used in this way.
If you ask it that way, I mean,
I just want to know which way you want.
Yeah, of course. If you ask it that way, I mean, it's also about the very general thing, like how should be the recommendations to stuff that into a multipart related in a mail. Yeah, so there might be the idea of you have just in total in the whole mail one piece of structured data describing being the machine readable part. Yeah? So the question is, where would you actually put it, especially also in presence of a quite complicated MIME structure, which many clients do today. And the main question is, do we need to invent something particularly new to let clients know this very particular MIME body part by a header or something like that is the one to look at? Or can we basically, leverage one of the existing mechanisms in a clever way?
This is Pete. I suspect this is going to be a problem with legacy implementations and not what is the right way to do it. Because if the structured data is to replace one internal piece of the multi-part related, right?
It's like an image. It's
right.
fine.
So
It
it's
should be
either
fine.
it's an image if we don't know about structured stuff, but if we know about structured stuff, we don't even display the image and we do this other thing, put up a little application or whatever. Logically, the right way to do it, logically, is multi-part related, and in there, one of the images is going to be a multi-part alternative, right? That would logically be the correct way to do it. And I think every existing implementation is going to choke on that. Yeah, I mean, so it depends on how well you want this to back off. The better way to do this might be do the multi-part related, have it as part of the multi-part related, just another part. It's not going to be referenced in the HTML because it's not going to have a CID link in there anywhere. But what Alexei cringed at
you can still reference it. It's just
you don't need to reference it, though, is what I'm about to say. Is what you can do is from the structured data part of the multi-part related, have a header that points to the CID of the thing that you're replacing. Then anything that knows how to deal with structured email is going to go through all the parts, is going to notice that one of them is this structured thing, and it can be content disposition, but I think you probably want just a content replacement thing or structured replacement thing or whatever. And something that understands structured data can go through, find that part, do the replacement, and then display it in the multi-part related in the correct place. I think that's logically the best way to do it and will probably cause the least damage to legacy clients.
Just a question, do you think it would be conformant with what multi-part related says?
Yeah, multi-part related is simply, I've got things that are going to reference other parts in this MIME part. So officially, you could do multi-part related with all the images up front and the HTML at the bottom. You could do, even without an HTML, you could do it with a PDF and have the pictures separate from, make your own mess. The thing is that most clients nowadays expect HTML up front, image, 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 and it will only display the images that appear in the HTML. So if you have other crap in there, it's not going to affect most clients, I don't think. Obviously, we need to test it.
Yeah, I think it's basically says also CID resolutions. So
right
within HTML, you just replace CIDs
with other CIDs, right? Yeah.
Well, or your internal representation. Well, however you reference the object, yes, basically.
Yep. So, I mean, it's a hack. It's not the right way to do it, MIME wise, but I think it'll work.
Okay.
Channel juries.
Juries. I'm not exactly sure about the use case here. In which case is an image, the replacements for structured data.
Yeah, I could have also just said it in the queue. So I was just confused about the use case. Yeah. So so typically I would imagine like the structured data in a multi-part related. You have an HTML, and in the HTML there is like a reference to a person, for example, and the person is a structured data element that is in a multi-part related, for example. So I just didn't understand the use case that Pete was raising. Maybe my use case also doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know, but
actually, now that you mention it, I was a bit confused as well. But do we need to? Shall we just do it on the mailing, or do you want to explain? Okay. They're not image replacements, basically.
No,
I think they can be other type of links.
Right. Yours' case is the easy one, which is the HTML is actually going to refer to structured data. Yeah. Legacy clients are going to ignore it because they're not going to know how to render it. And updated clients will just find it as the part. I thought the complicated case was
no. I think that's the case we were talking about. That's why I was a bit. I thought you were overcomplicating.
Yeah,
but okay,
all right. What I
so actually, you are saying that the easy case works as expected. It should work as expected.
The question about whether you use inline, I think you can, but I think it's going to be ignored for any type that most legacy clients don't understand, and it's going to end up as an attachment anyway. Because that's what they do. So you know, do what you want to do, but I think most clients are just going to show it as an attachment and move on. But yeah, for the base case, I thought the concern was the complicated case. The base case, stick in the multi-part related. That's what it's for.
So very shortly on that attachment thing. So would we need to add something in which we say like clients supporting SML should basically not show it as an attachment then, explicitly?
You can, but clients supporting SML will hopefully be displaying something interesting.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
But it's just an additional behavior, right?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I think inline content disposition line might help. It might not have the desired effect. It might be ignored, but it might help in some cases.
Next. All right. So this might actually be something now coming into an update then, right? Yeah.
I wrenched my head into the right shape and realized that we have this mail server called imap.gmail.com, which is used with every mail client in the world. And the mail clients that are disturbed by JSON LD or really anything we're talking about will have been disturbed by Google's pretty much equivalent thing many years ago, and have fixed it long ago. What Google does isn't exactly like what we're discussing, but the disturbance should have the same shape as far as I can understand. If something breaks because of what we're discussing, then it should also break because of what Google has been doing for 10 years. And if it doesn't break on Google, then it shouldn't break on this.
Okay.
Therefore, all mail clients have been fixed due to the awesome power of Google.
Well, I'm not sure we can 100%. We should still check probably, but yeah. I like your enthusiasm.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, we come to another tricky thing. No, okay. There's also the case of non-representation, in which actually there's structured data. We had the example of the vacation notice, for instance, which the vacation notice might have both cases. So if it's just a vacation notice, the message itself, it would be fine. But if we have a preemptive vacation notice in which we attach the structured data about absence in just another mail exchange between the two parties, the vacation notice is just some add-on information passed in that conversation, which means in that sense it's non-representative of the actual content of the message. It's rather something the mail client wants to deal with separately, probably on behalf of the user. So the question is basically, would that also be okay to do that in multipart related? Because in that sense, it might not relate to the actual message text. Should that part be multipart mixed? I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like multi-part related is exactly obvious case. However, what Pete said earlier about having a part inside multi-part related which is not referenced and top-level header fields pointing to it, that might actually address exactly the case you're asking about.
Yeah,
maybe. And then it doesn't, well,
I think
if we define a new header field, it doesn't even have to be multi-part related. It can be anything.
Yeah.
It just points to a specific body part, which will be handled specially.
But which would, of course, be probably a more problematic for downwards compatibility. So I think multipart related in that sense might be the most elegant way to do it right now.
Okay.
The main question is here, is it violating somehow the idea of multipart related in a sense, or is there a multipart related police somehow? I don't know.
No, I don't. I cannot think so.
Okay.
Sorry for jumping in the queue again. Philip?
Yes, this is Philip. Not specifically about how to place non-representation into the MIME, but just generally about the need for it. I guess first of all, I have a question for the full representation case. Is there any guidance on whether clients are allowed to use that and choose not to display the message at all to the user? So if you send like a vacation notice that has a user visible text part that's like, I'm going to be out on vacation next month, like a proactive one, that also has a full representation, can the client just hide that message entirely? And if so, then maybe instead of a non-representation case, all use cases of that could be replaced by just another full representation message that would be meant to be hidden. So like, I guess thinking about the vacation notice case, right? I can kind of see two cases where you might want to use this. One is a preemptive one to let people know your schedule, ahead of when you're actually gone. And another is potentially to update any schedule changes. And in both of those cases, you're talking about attaching this as a rider to some like unrelated message, right? But would you not want to send out a message that could be textually read in a legacy client that like actually says I'm going to be out on vacation next month, right? So and similarly for the update, why would you, if you're going to update it, why would you only want to silently update it for clients that support structured email? Why would you not just send out an actual textual update as well?
Okay, there were multiple questions inside. I try to sort it a little bit and be brief on giving my impression. So first of all, yeah, I think there should be a way in which clients are enabled to auto process multipart alternative mails, but on behalf of the user, right? So if the user makes a rule or something like that, I think that is something the client might want to decide. The question is how far we because we don't necessarily prescribe client behavior in the spec. It's a question how far that goes into the actual document. In terms of, you pose the right question in terms of that, is that really, could you not just send another mail with the full representation? That's true. That's sort of a philosophical distinction. Of course, that causes a second mail to be sent, so that might be sought out if that causes maybe other kinds of issues somehow. I didn't think about that too deeply yet, but I still think there could also be other use cases, not just the structured vacation notice one, in which it might be useful to not send parallel messages in a way. But yeah, that's a good question actually. Yeah. So certainly this is a little bit a special case, this non-representation. I think Pete brought it up at some IETF meeting, but not blaming him. I mean, it's a good point for discussion. Yeah.
Ben?
This is Ben. So just to answer to this, why not send another message? Because we don't want to spam people. Because I don't really care very much when you have vacation. And I surely don't want to see 3 messages about you having vacation different days. I just don't really care. And for me, one of the advantages of the vacation note, the structured data, is the client can hide it, but we don't want to spam the others. A related thing is with a multi-part mixed, what you definitely want to avoid is that you have something showing as an attachment in the email clients. I think we should make every effort without breaking semantics of the specs to avoid that, because that's where vCard died. Because Thunderbird for a while attached vCards of my own address to messages, and recipients were very confused about that because they got emails with this attachment, and they were asking, okay, there's this attachment, I don't know what to do with this. You sent me some document and I cannot open it. I tried to double click on it and it doesn't open, and I don't have the application. What is this? So recipients were confused. It's annoying for clients too, because they will show the attachment icon for all the emails from you, and I'm just looking for an actual attachment. So you don't want to express that it shows up as an attachment in email clients. You want to avoid that because it will just confuse people and clients. So basically, I'm arguing for multi-part related here.
Just a quick in response to Philip. Can you hide the messages? Yes, of course you can. There are some clients that are either thinking or doing already hiding DSNs and MDNs. And then maybe displaying information about them elsewhere, right, in the UIs.
All right. So how much time do we have left? Is it this 5 minutes?
You have 4 minutes, 50 seconds.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if that includes discussion time or something like that. This is a point we started to discuss in Brisbane once, but it caused a little bit of confusion in there. So I try to make the example a little bit more clear. Probably it's easier to follow in that sense. So the question is, we are in that in that partial representation case. And the question is like, how can clients basically know and understand how the structured data and the actual HTML email or the human representation do relate to each other, so that the client probably can choose on certain forms of making the email better for the actual user. And if this kind of referencing is useful. So the idea is basically, again, as a motivating example, takes a newsletter example. So you have here a cooking newsletter, and you see here there is a link in the newsletter going to a certain recipe. Let's assume now that the sender of the newsletter included the recipe structured data within the structured data of the email itself. So based on that, already the client could have whatever, a sidebar or do an auto processing, save in my recipe book or something like that. But the question is, considering this is a very long newsletter with multiple recipes, would there be probably benefit for a client to know that this particular link in that newsletter or piece of information in the newsletter must not be just a link, or it can be also other kinds of stuff? Should there be a way that is defined in which the client could infer the relation between those two things, so that the client, for instance, could show a pop-up or something like that in that case? So that is like the baseline question here. Next slide, please. So yeah, so we just see the example here. So in that case, for instance, that's just a suggestion. That's nothing which the spec will prescribe, but to give an idea how that could be used by a client. to provide an actual action or display of information, within the actual HTML newsletter, which provides additional benefit to the user. Next slide, please. So if this is desired, the question is, how could that work? So one way would be to have a backward reference, meaning that in the structured data, there's actually a reference to the element which in the HTML newsletter, which I think is probably not the best idea. It might be clean because you only need to deal with the structured data, but on the other hand, it pollutes in a certain way the structured data with this kind of artificial reference to the content, especially if the structured data might go out of the context of that message. And also it might complicate the authoring of the whole authoring process because, you would need to know that HTML reference in the structured data composition process, which might not be the case how you write newsletters. Yeah? So the other way would, of course, be, next slide, please, a forward reference, basically meaning you provide a way in which within the HTML of the HTML body part, you reference in a certain way the structured data, and probably the best way to do that is the ID, which typically every structured data element has. And again, there is, that's actually the question how that would be done. Yeah, so, and it could be done, and what would be the best way here? Some very rough ideas could be the HTML ID element, probably not the right thing to use because it has a uniqueness constraint that might not always be the case here. So one thing, if I do some research here, one comes up with is this kind of data ID property, which is also used on the web sometimes. So that's actually a question open to debate. Is it something we want to have anyway? And if so, does this look like a viable approach? What do people think about it? And I hope this time at least the basic idea is clear what we want to achieve here, right? Or otherwise, please. Because I see some.
I'm curious what. That's from an actual newsletter, right? Sent to Gmail. Gmail supports.
You mean the screenshot, or you mean?
Yes, the screenshot.
Yes.
What?
Not necessarily.
How is that referenced in that example?
It's
what does Gmail or Outlook or whoever do?
It's so the left-hand side screenshot. It's not necessarily from Gmail. It's like from, I don't know, from an email client, whatever it was. I don't know. And it's a URL to the New York Times homepage. So it's basically similar to the ID you see on the right side, but with a .html in the end.
Yeah, but wherever you got that screenshot, contains some sort of connection, contains some sort of encoded link between the text and the structured information.
No, it includes a link to the website, actually. That doesn't necessarily mean...
Right, get it.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in the case that here, the .html is very similar to the ID. It would be just a coincidence. It could be any idea in the structured data, any ID identifier in the structured data.
In a way, it looks really like the link preview, which I suppose has a connection.
Can't follow. Okay, yeah. So
you hover over the link and it shows a little blob previewing it.
This is Daniel Kahn-Gilmore. I might not be understanding the question here, but if this is multi-part related, why is it not a content ID?
I think the content ID I mean,
the content ID will be outside of this.
Yeah,
right?
I understand your point. I think this is just a small snippet. So actually, the structured data could have more than just one recipe. Imagine the newsletter has 5 recipes. You would not have necessarily. So at the current state, the idea is to have just one JSON LD file, which might contain an array of those recipes.
Okay, so then like it's a fragment after a content ID.
I'm not aware. Is fragments possible for content ID? Yeah. How would it work? So how would, but yeah.
I mean, y'all can know better than I do.
Yeah. So
it sounds to me like it's a content ID with a fragment.
Okay. That sounds. Okay.
John, do you want to use the mic?
Yeah.
Yes, shockingly, Dan and I agree on something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the most natural way to do this
Uh-huh.
in MIME is use a content ID to point at the section
Okay.
with the structured stuff, and then use
Okay.
a fragment ID to figure out which piece it is.
That
And that's
sounds like a very good idea. Maybe
yeah.
I can ask you
Yeah.
for the detail. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So we are at the end with this aspect. Probably we skip the other one for this time. I don't know. Looking
I
ahead of
mean,
the time.
yeah.
Oh, I
You're
don't know.
out
I
of
look at
time.
the chairs.
Okay. Are you happy with what we achieved this time? Okay. Let's switch to use cases then. Yeah.
You have 18 seconds left to change.
Oh,
quickly.
All right. Use cases. Now it's the fun part. So far it was a structural part. Well, depends on what your fun is, but what can we actually use this for? And this presentation is just going to, the intent of this presentation is just to give you a little inspiration, some overview, some ideas what could be done with this. The idea is not to talk about every specific use case and model that and to go into the details. It's just to give you an overview about this. If you have questions, can you remember them to the end? Because I just wanted to give the big overview and then you can ask the questions at the end. However, maybe some of this, what I'm saying, is going to spark some ideas with you that this could be not only used in the way that I'm describing, but in other ways. If you have such kind of ideas, please write them down. We are looking for ideas how this can be used. This is just the result of some brainstorming we did, but there's plenty of other ideas. So if you have ideas, very welcome to hear them if we have time after, or you send them to the mailing list. Thank you. So just to categorize this a little bit, there's two ways to categorize this. First is who's the sender, who's the recipient. So we have the generic cases where a person sends to a person. That's a classic email. I'm writing something to another person. We can possibly enhance that with SML. For example, when we do polls or asking questions, there's a way to do that. An easier way to implement is a service to person, where this transactional emails, where some server is sending out notifications to all their users, meaning invoices, purchase confirmations, tracking, click this link, and so on. We have also person to service, which could be a way to implement forms when a person sends something to a company, to get that into a structured form, so it doesn't have to be processed in a manual way. And service to service is a thing that doesn't exist. If you have two companies talking to each other, two services, they use HTTP REST, and we don't do that by email. Okay, next. The other way to look at this is what are you going to do with this information once it arrived? What are you going to do with that? In which way do we process that? And I try to classify that in 4 different ways. One is auto-processing. So the email client can directly act upon that without the user actually doing something. Next slide. The obvious one is vacation notice, and we just talked about that. What could be done automatically? For example, an email client might delete them automatically. I might say, I don't want to hear about this, delete these straight away. If I have a support system, am I sending automatic invoices out and I'm getting a lot of backscatter about I'm out of office. I don't care when I'm sending you an invoice that you're out of office. So these can be automatically deleted instead of going to support. That's helpful. Next. Bounce notification, same thing. What you see on the left here is a screenshot of taken when I prepared this presentation from our corporate support system. This is our corporate. This is just the top here. You see all of that 100% are bounces. So this is creating work for support that can be processed automatically, either trashed, or we can automatically unsubscribe the user, or that's up to the company decide how to do that. But right now they're completely unstructured. It's undelivered mail to resender, delayed mail. We have at the bottom, we have somewhere, it's not on the screenshot, but there is something in German, automatische Antwort. It's impossible to process. So that would be useful to make something express that. Next. Email verification, super annoying. Like log in, you click here, you have to go to your browser, find the email, click on the link, go back to the browser. There's ways to make that more smooth. For example, would be a little bit more difficult to implement. Like I'm in my browser, fill out the email address. I have a button underneath in the browser saying, verify this email address. And with clicking this button, I give the permission to maybe an add-on in my browser to respond to that specific email. So the server sends me the email, it replies automatically, and I stay in my browser, and at some point it goes check mark done. That's difficult to hook up all that, I grant that, but this theoretically there's possibilities to do things. Next. PGP SMIME, there is this autocrypt out there, there's a PEP out there who are trying to proactively send encryption keys to all the recipients. And you can do that in headers, or you could do that in SML. And with SML, you can have some more information where I'm more specific about how I want this. For example, maybe I don't want you to encrypt emails to me, but I want you to sign them or some other ways, and I can express that because I have more data there available. Next. By the way, that would be an example for non-related, that what Hans-Jörg was, if I'm sending PGP keys not related to the email message that I'm sending, that would be an example. Another big ball of use cases is loading data in another application. All of you will immediately think that's what MIME for. Next slide. But in the year 2000, when I wanted you to send you a song, I would find the MP3, attach it to an email, send it by my message, send it to you. You would save it, you would play it. We don't do that anymore because nobody has MP3s anymore. We all use Spotify for, thank you, music industry. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you a Spotify link. But I need to worry about, do I have Spotify? Does the recipient have Spotify? Does he have a subscription? Is his Spotify hooked up to his stereo? I often don't have this information. Even if I know it is linking things to a specific service, if the other person is using Apple Music or Amazon Music on his Alexa, they can't play that. They can't do anything with the Spotify link. This is really annoying. So they have to click on the Spotify link, then find them, copy out the artist and the song, paste that into their software. So there is no interoperability there. What we can achieve here with SML is to have interoperability. In SML, I can just express the song and the artist. This is data. We can express that as text, but also as data. And then the application can either open Spotify or Apple Music or Deezer, or it can even find that maybe I have the song in my local MP3 collection and can find it there. And I can either open an application or I can have a little preview in my mail client directly where I'm directly playing that song and preview that. And if I want to open it in my Alexa, I have a button there to do that. These are the use cases that are enabled. I see Philip looking there because you have Apple Music there. That would be a way to more tightly integrate that in some system. And this is generic. This is not tied to any specific provider. So that would be a very good first use case to specify, but this is what people do all the time. Next slide. Invoices. We all get invoices by email, but if I have to manually pay them, I have to copy and paste the bank account number, the recipient, the amount, the node that I have to add to this. I have to manually copy and paste that. We could make that easier if you express that in structured data. And in fact, there's governments out there which are legislating that right now. Next year in Germany, it's becoming mandatory by law to send those. In Italy, I think it already is, and France is coming. And very soon it's going to be mandatory even for small businesses to send these invoices in a structured form. Currently, they're using some horrendous PDF contains Zugpferd, contains XML, contains UN, EDIFAC, something, and it's horrible. This could be a nice standard to do this. And it's up to the email client then how to react to that. Obviously, there's obvious phishing dangers here that a spammer sends me something, please send me money. And I say, yes, okay, and I send it to the wrong thing. So there needs to be some security consideration from the client, but there could be whitelist and other ways to do that. Accounting is another interesting case because as I'm receiving the invoices as a company, my accountant has to actually type this what is in the invoice into his accounting system to do the accounts for my company, and that's expensive. They have people doing that. Why not automate that so that they can read it in automatically into their accounting system? Next. Locations, that's a cool one. If you use WhatsApp, you probably already used that. But in the year 2000, we couldn't do that. We didn't have GPS. 2010, we would send a GPS coordinate and an address, and I would copy that address into my TomTom and wrote there. Nowadays, we're sending Google Map links, but again, we have the same problem with the songs. It's not interoperable. I'm tied to Google Maps. If I want to use Apple Music or Apple Maps, or I want to use Waze, it's difficult for me. So this is kind of enforcing a monopoly here. With structured data, we can just send the GPS address, GPS location and the address, and I can open that in my mapping application. And there is a geo URL, but it's not really being used very much. So this is in a nice way, and the email client, because it knows this is type location, can render a map right next to it, right to the email. I can see the location, and then I have a button open in my mapping application, whichever is my preferred one. And then it can show the location where I want to go to related to my location. I can route me to that. And with SML, we can actually send updates to that. So you don't have to wait where you are, but even as you move, we can send updates for the next hour or something, depending on what you're sending. You can send updates, and I can meet you wherever you are. WhatsApp already does that. Email cannot do this right now. With the SML, it could. Next. Another big use case is combining the data that I'm receiving in the email with local data that I already have on my machine, either in existing emails or in other applications. Next. For example, there's a group of people, there's a team, and they need to agree on a meeting time. Do we meet Monday or Tuesday? At which hour? What we have right now, what we get is a picker where I can pick my preferred meeting times, which ones I'm okay with. But I actually have to go and look, okay, Wednesday, 9 a.m., I have to look in my calendar. Is there something that is there which is colliding with that? And I have to do that for every data point here. If we express that in a machine readable way, it can merge that with my actual calendar and show, okay, this is the proposed meeting, but it actually conflicts with my dentist appointment that I have at that same time, and can overlay and merge these two informations, the proposed meeting times, multiple of them, with my calendar. Next. That's an interesting one too. Travel coordination. So when I came here, I actually spent like almost a full day of work just to plan the trip, because I'm booking the hotel at booking.com, and I'm looking for the plane ticket at Skyscanner, and it sends me to Lufthansa. I'm booking there. So I'm getting an email with a booking confirmation from booking.com for the hotel, and I get a confirmation from Lufthansa for the flight. And if I didn't book everything on the same site, what is the only place that knows that I have both the hotel and the flight on that day? It's my email client. My email client is the only place where these two information come together. So the email client, if this is structured data, can know, okay, I'm flying from this location to that location at that time, and I'm arriving at a certain time at a certain point, and I have a hotel on the same day in another point, which is very close, but not exactly the same one. So the email client can either both render both locations, but it can also say, hey, I noticed you have to be in two spots in the same day. Shall I offer you the transport between them? And then it can say, find a taxi for me, or an Uber, or a bus, or a train.
Oh, he didn't say anything.
Okay. So that is this is something that this is why Google is doing this, I think, because they're interested in covering these use cases to offer Uber tickets or whatever. But my email client can help me planning the trip because it knows I need this. Next. And there's ways to monetize that, obviously, right? This is a little complicated. Please don't be overwhelmed with this, but this is a real thing. If you're ordering a lot from Amazon, you have been in this situation. So I order 3 products on Amazon with a single order. A little bit later on the same day, I order 2 more products from Amazon. So I have 2 orders with 5 products in total. Now Amazon goes and collects these things together and takes 2 products from the first order and 1 product from the second order, puts them in the same parcel, sends it to me, and then I get 1 from the first order and 1 from the last order in 2 other parcels. So I get 3 parcels, 1 of which contains products from 2 orders. So good luck keeping track of that when which product arrives. It's really difficult because I get the delivery notification from DHL, and of course, Amazon knows this, but I have to go to the Amazon website. So if I want to see that in my email client, it's really difficult to keep these things together. But if this was expressed as structured data, the email client can make a list of products that I purchased, which product I purchased, on which day, for which price, and the delivery status of that. Because it can link the different IDs together and track the package for me. So it knows, okay, this TV hasn't been delivered yet. The iron is arriving tomorrow, and the other 2 things have already arrived, and one of them is my letterbox. It can fusion all these things together with the IDs. That would really help me a lot because I order a lot from Amazon. Next. One other way to classify things, what can we do with SML? Nice visualizations, graphics. Next. For example, we were at Make Better Email in London. Rick sent a nice message to us and made fantastic hotel recommendations. He sent 5 hotels to us, said, these are the hotels, we recommend them. So he sent a name, and I don't remember, did you send a link to booking.com in them? No, you just sent the name, right? So what I have to do is I have to go to booking.com, copy the name out, paste the name, enter the dates, look at the hotel. Then I do the same thing for the second hotel, copy the name, go to booking.com, paste it in there, look at the hotel. I do that 5 times. That's annoying. If Rick had dragged these things from booking.com into his email client, and his email client is SML capable, the email client can extract the fact that this is a hotel. This hotel has implicitly a certain location, geolocation, and address. So actually what my email client understands is this is an email with a list of 5 different hotels, and my email client understands these are hotels. And it also understands, even if it doesn't know what a hotel is, it still understands there are 5 locations in it. So it can render a map on the site with the 5 dots, like you see here. So there's a dot, there's the 5 dots, which represent the 5 hotels. I can hover over one of them, and it can show me a little display about that. And this is the information that is in the SML structure. And it could even, to some degree, do that if it doesn't even know what a hotel is, because these are just locations, and it can show that. It knows generically of locations. But if it knows what a hotel is, it can actually go to the booking.com API, fetch the lightest price, put it in there, allow me to click on that, and allow me to reserve the hotel. And again, there's a monetization possibility because affiliate, you can actually make money with us. But this is an actual useful thing because I can render that right next to the email that Rick sent me. I can just hover over things and do this without copying and pasting. Next. Polls. Maybe if you've seen that on WhatsApp, somebody sends a poll, what is your favorite something, or favorite meeting time? And WhatsApp does it really nicely because I can make my choice and I see how many people voted what. So I see already what is the most popular choice. And I like if it's meeting times, I can really say, okay, most people want to this date. Can I make this work? So I can adapt to that. And I can even see who made which choice. And that is really difficult to do with email because if you have 6 participants, If you want to send this by emails, you already have 25 emails passing around. If you have 101 participants, you have 10,000 emails going around because everyone sends the email to everybody. And that's only if they don't change their mind either, then it becomes more. With SML, I can send this poll. The email client can render that in a nice way, in the same way that WhatsApp does. And with the update feature, I don't have to send emails around. It can just show who voted what and can show me that. Next. So that's the ideas that we had. That's our brainstorming. So I have two questions for you. A, did this spark any ideas of any of you? Do you have maybe more use cases how we could use that? If so, I would like to hear about that. Otherwise, if you have any questions about this, then you have 40 seconds.
I think you might have inspired some and scared some others, but that's, you know, that's
This is
okay.
Daniel Gilmore. Many of these are interesting. In the chat, John Clenson was raising concerns about the security implications of many of them, particularly with automated processing. They all seem quite different from one another.
Yeah.
And the challenge in making this be something that would work would be in knowing that enough of your peers were using tools that understood the specific use case that you were involving structured mail with. So you've outlined a very ambitious program here that looks pretty cool. I don't know who would not want to be able to do these things.
Okay.
But there's a lot of UX works to do. And if we try to do all these use cases, this is a decades-long agenda.
Yeah.
Especially for a distributed ecosystem like email. So right. I think we probably should try to narrow in a little bit on beyond all of this. It's very it's inspiring to see this, but I think it might be too ambitious for the near term.
So yes, of course it's ambitious. Like, this is a new way to send data. Like, you can do anything with data. So this is kind of giving the scope a little bit.
It's an old way to send data.
Huh?
It's an old way to send data.
That,
yeah.
Yes, right? For email, it's new, but yes, it's very old. In I agree with you. This is like just showing the future a little bit. I would say not 10 years, because like if you think back 10 years, was there even WhatsApp 10 years ago? So we can be a little bit more ambitious and then 10 years. But yeah, many of these security concerns can be alleviated by saying I only do things based on user actions, or I only do display something. Like if I display locations on a map, there's no security concern to that. If I want to initiate payments, then there's a whole...
Yeah, let's not do automated payments.
Exactly, right. So that's a whole different ballgame. So that's up to the email client to make the decision, to the UX decisions. We can make some ideas, some expectations, but it's ultimately up to the email client how to deal with that. Another point that you made, yes, we have to agree on a common vocabulary. We cannot just all express things the way we feel it's right, and then the consuming email application has to somehow make sense of this. But there needs to be some kind of vocabulary, like this use case we would express in this way. Kind of that we did with the vacation notice, we would have to go through them. That would be a different working group. It would be not this working group here, but somebody has to do that. That's true. So that everybody agrees we do it this way.
Okay, and John, you have the final word, and just keeping in mind we're over time a little bit, but
yeah, I want to start by reinforcing what Daniel said, but I'm questioning as I listen to this whether the current model of email on the internet is an appropriate transport medium for this. It's not just the kind of security, I'm only willing to let the client do this, but not that issues that you're talking about. It's a whole collection of things having to do with the need for absolute authentication of a message originator, which is a problem we have been which we have been unsuccessfully solving for 30 years now. And a whole series of other things like that, that as soon as you change this from transmitting information in a useful form for display to user to anything resembling an automated process, even poor dumb user just click this button, you're going into really interesting territory. And as I say, I'm not certain the current email infrastructure is the appropriate transport for this, given those situations. And I think there are a whole series of other security and privacy and compromising this and that and the other questions lying around out there. And I hope as you move forward with this, you'll address those issues, because otherwise, to make this sound very much like the threat it is, it'll show up on IETF last call.
Very quickly, we know we have a trust document,
Right,
so
exactly.
we are not going to solve it
Exactly.
today. All right.
Exactly. So the dangerous stuff is the trust document is going to address that. This was just to show what can be done, but yes, this needs to be addressed. Many of these things don't have new security implications, like when Rick is sending me suggestions for hotels, and we're seeing that on a map, there is no inherent security implication. Same with sending a song around, sending the location around. It's just up to me to act to that. Do I need this location or not? Do I want to open that in my mapping application? And right now,
those things have privacy implications too.
All right. Thanks a lot. So that was just an idea to inspire you a little bit. Like I said, this is not to drill down into the details. It was just an inspiration.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. See you on the mailing list.